Hi, everyone, and welcome to our monthly Financial Security for All Community of Practice webinar. We're excited to be talking today about consumer decision making. And if you've been around FCS and 4-H for very long, you may have heard about this event that used to be the national event was at Western Roundup in Colorado. And for the last few years, it's been in Texas at an all-out FCS event. So we're excited to learn more about that and to get some tips for consumer decision making. So we'll have the chat open today, but we'll also have the Q&A open, and I'll kind of help circle around and make sure any questions or comments that you have get an answer if you'll put those in the Q&A. We'll also be monitoring the chat. And happy to have with us today, you may know Lori Gallimore. She's an extension specialist. Dr. Gallimore is an extension specialist with 4-H Youth Development at the University of Tennessee Extension. And then if you've ever been to the national event at Western Roundup, you may have already seen Matthew. So you may recognize Matthew Hibdon. He is chair of the FCS National Committee. So we have a quick little poll. Andrea, if you could pop the poll up for us. So here's our first question. Question number one, have you ever been involved in consumer decision-making competitive event in your state? Yes or no? And then part two, if you haven't, why not? So you may be new to extension, or I don't have enough time, I don't have the resources, or what is consumer decision-making, or some other reason. So feel free to put that in the chat if there's some other reason you haven't been involved in consumer decision-making in your state. So it looks like 55%, 52% yes, and then 48% no, so that's kind of even. And a lot of folks joining us today are new to consumer decision making or may not even know what that is. So great, you have come to exactly the right place for that. You can see the results for that. And some of us have said, I don't have enough time. So we'll give you some tips today to make this a really time efficient 4-H FCS activity for you. Well, again, we're so glad to have Dr. Gallimore and Matthew with us today to tell us all about consumer decision making and the new event that's held in Texas, the FCS National Championship and Conference. So I'll just turn it over to Matthew and Lori.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Lori and I are so excited to be here. When we planned this webinar, 5 months ago, feels like we're like, oh yeah, May, it's fine. We won't be busy then. And that was a lie we told ourselves. But we're thrilled that you took the time to be here with us today. So Lori's going to be running our PowerPoint for us, and we're going to mix it up and do some slides back and forth. That way you don't just listen to one of us the whole time. That's the beautiful thing about having a co-chair for your contest, because you get to share that burden. But the big question to ask yourself, right, as a consumer, how many decisions have you made today, right? They're endless, and they're decisions that you made months ago, right? About buying an outfit, right? What groceries you're going to buy, right? If you're planning a vacation, were you going to get back in time for this webinar? Were you going to be able to be somewhere where you could take the call from there? There's endless possibilities that we face as consumers, and our youth that we work with are facing those every day, even if they don't realize that they're making those or don't really have the full agency to do that yet, since they're teenagers, right? But we want to give them the skills to be able to navigate the consumer world that we're all in. And how do you do that? Through a judging contest, right? It's a crazy idea. We didn't come up with it. New Mexico piloted the program 20 plus years ago, and it's grown from there. But Lori and I truly believe that consumer decision making is one of the most quintessential judging teams that youth can be a part of, and helps teach them the critical thinking skills that they need to be able to thrive professionally and personally as they move forward into adulthood and beyond. So just think about that. How many decisions do you make, right? You don't know your criteria always, but that's part of what we do in this contest to help those youth develop those skills about knowing those criteria to look for. As was mentioned, we are part of the FCS National Championships and Conference event that is held in San Antonio, Texas. And we are one of 5 events. So consumer decision making is us. We also have the FCS Quiz Bowl, which is coordinated by Cheryl Varnadu, who is formerly of University of Georgia Extension, works with LifeSmarts now, if you might have met her through that. If not through her days in Georgia. Jamie Harris from the University of Tennessee also works with her on that event. The FCS Skillathon is coordinated by Kathy Floyd, also retired from the University of Georgia, and Jenna Kelly, who's from Oklahoma State. Our FCS Presentations event is coordinated by Julia Hurdlebrink from Colorado State, and the Fashion Review Contest is coordinated by Angela McCorkle from Texas A&M. And as you can see now, our distribution is, kind of west with Colorado, got some Texas in there and the South. And, over the past 20, 25 years since all of our events kind of grew out of the Western National Roundup, it started off as mostly folks in the Southwest region. And then, Montana was running the Fashion Review for a while. And then the Midwest kind of got involved and the South's involved now. So it's really shown how applicable all of our events are as the committee's grown over the years and as we've gotten more states involved. And so, right before the pandemic hit, the Roundup event in Colorado had over 1,200 people attend it, right? And I was talking to the event coordinator for that, and she said, I think FCS has gotten too big. You're going to have to do your own thing. And I'm like, no, we can't do it. We love you too much. Like, we could never leave. But like, we were outgrowing that. And so, we put it off, until after the pandemic, right? But to have our first event in Texas last year and to have over 250 people register for this event was phenomenal. And I think it speaks volumes to the power of the contest and the events that we have and how impactful those are for the youth, but also our amazing fellow committee members who are on the screen right now. Because to take that dream and pull it off is quite the undertaking, and Texas 4-H has been a very gracious host for us. So if you have it, we'll talk about this later about how to qualify for different events, but you can send youth to compete in multiple events at the same time, because we do share a lot of the same curriculum across the events that make it easier to train teams as well. And as I mentioned, the national event is in San Antonio, Texas, and our dates for next year are January 14th through 18th, 2025. And so in addition to having the contest, we also wanted to make this a special event for FCS youth, right? Because we want to build the future of this and make them feel like they're special and have that unique event that's just for them. And it was so much fun to see them all kind of fit in together, right? That's one of the beautiful things as a former 4-H'er that I always loved about 4-H is that they were always my people, right? Maybe I didn't fit in at high school all the time. When I was at a 4-H event, we all like had the same ideas about things and service and all the wonderful good things that 4-H teaches you. But to be able to be in things with other youth from your project area is just such a special thing, and they got to be goofy in their own ways and all that. So we have educational sessions for them. We'll do a pen swap. We have a words banquet. But we also give people free time to go explore San Antonio, right? Because we're right down next to the Riverwalk, and it's a great opportunity for youth to get to explore a part of the country they may have not have been to, even if they're from Texas. Because, it's like 800 something miles across. So odds are that you haven't been everywhere, even if you live in Texas. But there's a YouTube video that we have linked here that we can send out as well, unless Lori is pulling that up for us. Perfect. So this is a promotional video that they put together last year from the event. So I'll let you watch that real quick. I don't want to jump ahead in our program too much, but somebody asked a question already about making sure that the youth don't cheat when they're walking around with their clipboards. And that is of chief importance to us. We do allow youth to bring a clipboard to use whenever they're making their judging card markings and taking notes for reasons classes, but they cannot bring any other paper with them. And we do verify that it is a blank clipboard that they're using whenever they come into the room. So we take the integrity of all of our contests very seriously. And I was like I said, former 4-H'er and competed in consumer decision making 20 years ago. But that youth experience during our contest is at the heart of everything that we do because we want to make sure it's a positive experience for them. So thank you for asking that question, Becky. Lori?
All right. So if you're new to this game, kind of curious as to how this works, hey, the video looked fun. My team might want to go, but I have no idea how to do this. We decided today that it might be the easiest for us to deep dive into the consumer decision-making process and actually give you an opportunity to participate and show you all of the areas that go into this particular contest. As Matthew has mentioned before, the purpose of that decision-making contest is to teach financial management, consumerism, and decision-making skills. The contest itself is made up of 3 different components. There are 6 judging classes, 2 oral reason sets, and a group think or group processing component. What are those? We're getting ready to look at that in depth here in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about the contest order. So when we do the national contest, we will do 1 round of judging classes. There are 6 total. So we have 3 in one room. We have 3 in another room. They'll judge 3 classes first. And of those 3 classes, one of those has been designated as an oral reasons class that they will need to write their reasons for and present to the judge. And Matthew will talk about that contest here in just a little bit. But we judge 3 classes, do an oral reasons class, judge 3 more classes, do another oral reasons class. And then after lunch, we have the group think component of the contest. So what do all those look like? Well, let's take a look. We'll start with our judging classes. First of all, there is a magic study guide that is posted to the FCS National Conference and Championship website. I believe Andrea is going to maybe share that link with you. And if not, we have it at the end of the presentation that we can share with you. All total, there are 12 classes. And by classes, I mean topics that we are using over a 2-year period for consumer decision making. Some examples of classes that we have this year are athletic wear, bedding, beverage makers like coffee makers, fast food, subscription shopping, invitations, event venues, all of these things that even at their age, they are starting to shop for and have to make some serious decisions about. And so each one of those study guides is about anywhere from 8 to 10 pages in length. And the entire study guide, which is a little over 100 pages, is posted to the FCS website, which we'll share with you at the end of this. Today, though, I wanted to give us an opportunity to practice what it is like to look at a study guide on a particular topic and read a scenario and practice judging and see what happens at the end of that, just so you kind of have a feel of what the judging class system looks like. So here's an example. And friends, let me tell you, I literally made all of this up. Okay, so this is not research based. The real study guide is, but this is Lori's version of a study guide all about apples. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and give you a moment to read what it is that you need to know about apples. Everything that is included in the study guide That's what they need to know about this topic. We recognize that there's probably additional information, but everything that is asked, whether you are competing in consumer decision making or the quiz bowl, everything comes out of the study guide. So there's nothing that will vary off from that. So let's use our common sense with this one as well. But this is what we're basing this class that we're getting ready to judge on. We're basing it on this study guide right here. Okay. So when they get ready to judge, they walk into a room. There is a table set. It has a scenario printed and 4 options for them to evaluate. And their assignment is to rank those 4 options from best to least best, based on what the scenario is asking for, which comes off of the study guide. So here is your scenario for this particular class on apples. So take a moment to read that. All right, so we've looked at the scenario. Now let's look at the 4 option of apples that Lucinda has to select from to pick the one that she needs to make a picture of for her class project. And here are the apples. So you will have an image of the product at the contest, and in some cases you'll have the real object. It just depends on, we're all traveling in from all over the country. So it depends on, is it something that we can stick into our suitcase or borrow when we're on site? Most of the time we just have a photo of it, and the photo may have a description that goes with it to explain different features of it, size, colors, price, things along that line, right? So here are the 4 apples that you all have to select from to help Lucinda. Right? Now, there is a trick. I wanted to share several tricks with you all today on how to help teach your 4-H members to evaluate these classes, right? So we've got 4 options here, and we're going to flip back and forth between these slides. I'm going to use Tennessee as an example, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize up front for that. I hate it when people say, well, in my state, we do such and such. Nobody cares what your state does, I tell myself, but I'm going to use this as an example. There's multiple ways that you can do this. This is the way that I know how to do it, and this is how we coach our agents on evaluating the consumer decision-making process. So we encourage them to create a chart. And so they will have scrap paper. They can use that at the judging contest. They create a chart. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the numbers of the products on this slide. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then across the top is based on what is in the scenario. What are they looking for in the scenario? So if we go back to the scenario, you remember the apple must be red, uniform in size, and feature no or very little blemishes. And if it has an extra leaf, they get extra credit in their photography project. So those are the 4 components that we are needing to evaluate when looking at these apples. So we go back here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 down the side, and across the top, we have listed those 4 criteria, if you will, for evaluating those apples. And then we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to look at each apple to decide which of these features it matches. So if we go back and look at apple number 1, we know it needed to be red. It kind of sort of is. It needs to be uniform in size. It's pretty uniform in size. It needs to have little or no blemishes. It does not have that. And it needs to have a leaf, and it does not have that. So when we go back to our chart, we say yes on red, yes on uniform in size, but no on the other 2. And then we move to the second apple. So if we look at the second apple, The second apple, it's red, it's uniform in size, it's got some blemishes to it, so can't mark that one, but it does have a leaf. So we'll go back and mark our chart this way. We repeat the process with the number 3 apple. It is red, it is uniform in size, there are no blemishes, and it has a leaf. So it meets all 4 criteria, and we mark it this way. And then for apple number 4, it's not red. It doesn't have a whole lot of blemishes. It's uniform in size, but it doesn't have a leaf. And so we mark it up this way. And when we finish marking our chart, we can look at our chart to basically come up with our ranking. So if I'm going to rank these, I'm going to rank these 3 first because it met all of the criteria, 2 second because it met 3 of the 4 criteria. But if we look at 1 and 4, they're tied. They both just have 2. They only met 2 of the criteria. So the first one met the red and uniform size. The fourth one met the uniform size and no blemishes. Let's go back and look at that. There's 1 and there is 4. But if we look at the scenario, the first criteria, the most important criteria was that it must be red. And so with that, we know that apple number 4 is going to be out because it didn't even meet the first one, even though it has 2 of the criteria met, the same as the 1. I understand that is a little overwhelming and confusing. Friends, I'm going to tell you, I'm only a few years into consumer decision making. I am a lifelong 4-H'er. I came out of the Tennessee 4-H program and I did judging teams, but it was not consumer decision making. I'm not sure consumer decision making even existed back then. It was interior decorating. And so when I started learning consumer decision making, that's what my brain wanted to do because it was a little bit difficult to understand. But I finally mastered the chart, and the chart was an aha moment for me. So again, we use this in coaching our agents on how to do this because it helps them see that decision-making process. You're going to pick the item that meets the most of the criteria, and you're going to put the one on the bottom that is just not even close. So take a moment, put your ranking together. What did you come up with? If you came up with 3, 2, 1, 4, you got it right. So congratulations. I hope that you were able to successfully do that. So Matthew is going to come in next and talk to you about oral reasons because this chart leads into the oral reasons part. And that ranking of 3, 2, 1, and 4 mean a whole lot more than just 3, 2, 1, and 4. And he will explain the cut process of our scoring system. So Matthew?
Yeah, and just a recap too of how the contest is set up. As Lori mentioned earlier, we have the 2 judging rounds that happen at the national contest, and there's 1 set of reasons that's given per round, right? So there are 6 classes total. Out 3 classes in round 1, the youth are told 1 class that everyone gives the same set of reasons about, and the same thing for round 2. So in this scenario, if there was a class about apples and then the athletic shoes and coffee makers, right, and we said this was the reasons class, they would not be given reasons on the other 2 classes in that round, just this one. And so as Lori mentioned, at the top here, you can see the placing 3, 2, 1, 4, and then the cuts below that are the points that get subtracted if someone places that item in the wrong spot, right? So all of our placings are off 50 points, just like most judging teams, and we use the Hormel card. So if you've never used that before, you can just Google Hormel card judging class, and you can put in what your placing is, tell it what the cuts are, and it will tell you the scores for everything, right? To help you score that whenever you're training your teams. So the cuts between 3 and 2 is a 2 because that is a tight, or a small cut there, because if someone flipped and put 2 in front of 3 and they had a good reason, for it, we didn't think that was that big of a cut, right? But as you move further down, if you put the number 4 apple, which is in last place, if you put it in the first spot, then you're losing 5 points and then 3 points and 2 points, right? So that's how the Hormel card calculates all that. So you don't have to do it mentally. But back in the day, there used to be the sliding Hormel card. That's why it's called the Hormel card still. And it was the whole thing. So it's much easier now. The internet, we're so thankful for it. But that's what those cuts mean. So it's the penalty that someone gets for putting the ranking in the wrong order. So if you just flip the top two in this scenario, you would have 48 out of 50 points, right? But if you place it perfectly, you'd have 50 out of 50 points. And so the breakdown here of 3/2, 2/1, 1/4 is the basic layout of how you present oral reasons, right? And so you're giving that as the contestant, you're telling the judge why you place this class that way. The judge is not evaluating the youth on how they placed it, right? Because the placing score is that evaluation, so that stands, right? It's about their rationale and reasons why, right? If they could convince them why, they did it that way, right, and still hit all the criteria, make a convincing argument, that can still be a great set of reasons. But it's really just teaching the youth to articulate verbally why they made that decision, right? And there are some judging contests and FFA and 4-H that have used written reasons, and that's one skill set to have, but oral reasons is what we use in CDM. And we give the youth time, 10 minutes to prepare before the first set of reasons. So that's why we give them the note card during their round to take notes on, and they have 10 minutes to prepare before we start going through the reasons order that we do on a random rotation to keep it fair. So then they'll get called and go into the oral reasons judging room and give their set of reasons to the judge. So in this scenario, we would say, I place this class of apples 3, 2, 1, 4 for the following reasons, right? You can include some criteria from the scenario, right? That I forget our person's name from the scenario.
Lucinda.
Right, Lucinda, thank gracias. Lucinda is looking for an apple, right, for a photography project, and these are the criteria she's looking for, right? Based on these criteria, I place 3/2 because of X, Y, and Z, right? I found this class to have a difficult middle pair, in comparing the second and first apple, and then I found this class to have an easy last pair, and 4 clearly placed last at the end of the class because it did not meet the criteria like the others did, especially because it was a green apple, right? And again, there's no right or wrong way there, but the youth need to show that they assessed it, right, based on the criteria, and they paid attention to what that was, and that they can basically justify that oral reasons score. We don't recommend for the national contest that they read from notes, because generally it's a stronger set of reasons, and they feel more confident if they're not reading from notes, but they can bring note cards into the room with them if they needed it just to glance down. But there's a time limit too, so 2 minutes. Normally they don't need it. Imagine yourself at 15, staying there in front of a scary adult, trying to regurgitate this information about a judging class that you just looked at 5 minutes ago. You're not going to take that full 2 minutes probably. But that's our time frame to kind of keep the contest going on. So they'll give their set of reasons and then go back into the holding room, and then we'll do the second round of classes and then have another set of reasons that they give there. One other thing just to mention about the curriculums, we've talked about that. Lori talked about the classes that we have available in the study guide. We update the curriculum every 2 years. So right now we're in the cycle where the information we use for this contest in January is the same as what we did for this past year. But then after January's contest, we will evaluate the curriculum with the rest of the FCS committee and make sure that things have not changed, right? When I first did CDM, televisions were part of the classes, right? If I wrote a study guide on televisions, it would be outdated the minute we published it online, right? Because we would have 4K, then 8K, and then whatever the next thing is, right? So we want to have classes that are about technology, like wearable technology, right? But we try to write the study guides in such a way where they're adaptable, right? And that we can still write classes on it, right? But it's still good information for the youth to know in a dynamic, market, right? We did ground transportation, right? If you would have written that 15 years ago, there would be no ride sharing opportunities, right? And so as the consumer market rapidly develops, it seems impossible for us to have that curriculum, but that's why we do it every 2 years to evaluate it and make sure that other things have not changed in the market. Even if we keep the same class, we still evaluate the study guide to make sure that there's no new information that we need to add into that. So I just wanted to make that point about the curriculum before we move forward.
If I could add one thing in terms of reasons, that was not a skill set that I had developed in 4-H, because we did not do reasons with interior design judging. And so that whole concept was very new to me. I was coached on how to do reasons by a livestock coach. So let me encourage you, for those of you all who are like, I want to start this, but I'm not exactly sure how. If you can find someone who is an expert in livestock judging, get them to help you learn the process, or maybe even work with your 4-Hers on how to do oral reasons. Every time I develop one of these scenarios, I go ahead and write out the reasons just for practice purposes, so that it makes sense to me in my head as well. I would encourage you, they need to be able to write those out as that will help them to be able to verbalize that information. So writing may be a good first step on that. So writing and find a livestock coach to help you learn oral reasons are two big helps with this particular part of the contest.
Okay, so the last part of the contest is my favorite personally, but because it is something that taught me skills that I have to utilize every day in my professional and personal life. And I didn't realize when I was 4-Her that I was learning all these things, right? It was one of those kind of sneak attacks of life lessons that you learn in 4-H sometimes. But the rest of the contest is done individually, right? As that youth get their score for their individual placings and their individual set of reasons. The groupthink activity involves the entire team. And so after we finish the first 2 rounds of the contest that are the judging and reasons classes, then we have everybody back in holding and bring them in one team at a time to a different set of judges for the groupthink scenario. And so we have 12 classes that are part of our curriculum. We pick 6 of those to be those 6 judging classes. And then we pick one other one to be the groupthink class. So in this example, we are going to use apples, but we would not do that in the real world, right? Because we would not do the same class for groupthink that we would do for the placing classes. But basically, we're seeing how the team works together, right? And the scenario or the rubric, thank you, scorecard rubric is on the website for you to view. But there are 5 basic steps that we're looking for in the groupthink process. For them to be able to ascertain the issue or problem and to state the facts, to determine alternative solutions for the problem, list personal or social goals or the criteria that are bearing on the problem, evaluate alternatives according to the goals or criteria, and make a decision based on the evaluation, right? So those are the kind of learning outcomes up here, right? But what happens in the room whenever they go into this is that there's a 10-minute time period that they have to do this whole groupthink process. They walk into the room and are seated at the table. There's a scenario face down on the table. Whenever they flip that over, their 10 minutes starts. So then the youth read the scenario to figure out what they're going to be working on, right? What problem are they trying to solve? And sometimes it's a specific problem, right? Like this one. Lucinda is taking a photography class in school. Her instructor has assigned the class to make a perfect photo or a photo of the perfect apple. What characteristics should Lucinda consider to pick the most perfect apple? So this is a scenario, right? We're not giving them examples of apples necessarily and saying rank these, right? You could give somebody examples of different. We did checking accounts one time, which is kind of a little bit crazy, right? But in that, we did give them examples of checking accounts to choose from, and so there's many ways that you can write a scenario for groupthink. But for this one in particular, right, it relies on their knowledge of that study guide, right? To know what the best criteria for the perfect apple is, right? And of course, that would be studied and researched and all those reasons why, not just because we like red apples and not green apples, because both have purposes for different things. But they would read this scenario and then work together as a group to work through the problem, right? And so the judges are going to evaluate how they work together as a team, right? Did they talk about all characteristics, right? Did they talk about enough of them, right? Did they say, oh, well, she needs to look for an apple that's shiny and red, and that's it, right? that's not showing deep critical thinking about it, right? So we want to see how the group works together in this process, and then they have 8 minutes to do that. They don't have to take that full time, but if they've not started giving a presentation with 2 minutes remaining, then we give them a warning, because the last part of this is to do a presentation to the judges about why they made that decision as a group, right? So say it's the four of us, right? Andrea, Laura, Lori, and me, right? We walk in there, we read the scenario, right? There's a lot of different ways you could do it. You could say, oh, hey, Lori, why don't you read this for us? Or you could ask, does everyone want to read this to themselves? Do we want to read it aloud? You know your teams when you're working together. You know what will work well for them and how they work well together. But we want to make sure that all the youth participate in this process, right? And someone's not domineering the situation. Not that anyone's ever been in a meeting or part of a group project where someone's voice was louder and you didn't get to participate and you just kind of sat back, right? That's not what we want. What we want to teach them how to work together and be the best colleagues that they can be someday. But to also listen to each other, right? And if somebody says an idea that might not be the best idea, you can be like, oh, well, yeah, Lori, that is a good point. But I think from the curriculum, I remember, this other thing being in there, right? And teaching those, nice ways to work together, have that group consensus, even if they disagree about something, right? That's fine. That's normal. It's all part of that process, but we want to see them have that group think process together, evaluate all those criteria, right? You could say, well, maybe she wants to take a picture of an orange as well as an apple, right? To show a contrast. I mean, in their discussion, there's no like right or wrong with that. It's about them working together, right? When they come to their presentation, that's when, they're looking at, did the youth meet the criteria that was part of the study guide? Did they understand the situation and did they make a, convincing argument? They might not take the full 10 minutes for that, but they have up to 10 minutes to do that. Whenever 10 minutes is called, then, that's the end of their presentation. But I know that's kind of nebulous to think about in the grand scheme of things, but if you read through the scorecard that is on the website that we link to, and that kind of shows you the criteria that they're looking for. And if you go to YouTube and type in CDM groupthink, there's a lot of scenarios and presentations that different states have put together kind of as training resources of how their teams have worked together.
So before we go on to the next part of our presentation today, let's pause for a moment. This was a lot of information at one time. So Dr. Hendricks, Miss Andrea, are there any questions that we can answer for the group?
It looks like the one that we had, Matthew answered live. It was about, how did you make sure that they weren't cheating with their clipboards? I don't see any other questions now. Feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. If not, we'll carry on. Thanks.
We will roll on to the next part. So this next part is how the scoring part works. And Matthew's kind of already hinted to that just a little bit, but he's got some more information to share. So Matthew, back to you.
Yeah. So, like I said, there are 50 points for each of those 6 judging classes they do. So if we're looking at individual score, right, there's 300 points that a youth can get for those, 50 points for each of the 2 reasons classes. So 100 points there. So that brings you to 400 total points for an individual, right? And we do drop the lowest score from a team if there's a 4-person team. If not, 3 people is the minimum that you need to have for a judging team. So the total team score is out of 900 points for the classes and 300 points for the reasons. So that's kind of why that's broken down that way. And we give out awards at the national contest for individual and team scores in placings, individual and team scores in reasons, and then high scoring individual overall team, and also group think. So it's 400 points for the group think total, 200 points from each judge that are added together. So if you ever look at our score sheets on the website, it's going to look like a huge number with up to 1,600 points for a team, which is not kind of the normal score you might see for meets judging or some other judging events. But that's kind of the reason why our scores are broken down that way. And we have all of our scoring done by an electronic scoring system. So all the youth have a card that has the judging classes on there. They write the name of the judging class at the top of the card. That way we know which one that they're doing. They clearly mark the ranking So we list out all the possible rankings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 3. All those possibilities that are from that Hormel card are on that scorecard, and then we scan that, and then also do verify that the scores went in there correctly as well. But that helps us keep down on user error of hand typing everything in, or back in the day, calculators and hours of time. So that helps us get the results done. That way we can have the awards banquet that night, and everybody can figure out if they win. Because it is a long contest. It starts in the morning about 8 o'clock when we do an orientation, and then we do serve the youth lunch during the contest because it does go into the afternoon. Usually between 1:30 and 3 o'clock is when the last team leaves. But one other thing about the group thinking process, that is the last part of the contest. So once a state is done with that, they're good to go and come find their chaperone, enjoy the rest of their time, get ready for the banquet, go take a nap, go scream into the void, whatever they need to do at that time to process everything. But that's the breakdown of all the scoring. And then we print off or upload a copy of the entire contest results onto the website as well. So if you want to see how that looks, that's also on the FCS website.
Thank you, Matthew. All right. So most of you all identified, hey, I am new to the extension world or new to your position. I'm not really for sure. Where do you even begin with this? So again, I'm going to share with you how Tennessee put this together. Every state, this is the great thing about 4-H and extension. Every state is completely autonomous. So everybody does it a little bit differently. And this is not necessarily the right way or the best way for you. It's just a way that one group has done it and it has worked. So first step is kind of a meeting of the minds. We need to have everybody on board with this event. And again, you'll have the FCS website link that you can look at that has what to expect. The video is on there. The study guide is on there. The scorecards are on there. Everything that you need is on there in order to successfully do this event. Administrators having county agents or county educators on board, surveying an interest. Is there even an interest for this contest in your state? And your 4-H foundations, because having a little monetary support, especially to get to the national contest, is crucial. It's especially crucial for us. So making sure that everybody's on board with that is your first step. The second step is make your life easy. This should not all fall onto one person. We have an entire committee of 8 people that work to put together the national contest, and each one of us have a full load. So make your life a little bit easier. Put together a committee that you can work with that is made up of administrators and county agent educators and foundation representatives, and maybe even some 4-Hers as well, or volunteer leaders. There's some things that you can do with this committee. One, we encourage you to come and visit the national contest. We had several states this year. Some had a team competing, some did not. They said, hey, I just want to come and see what it's about. And you're welcome to come and watch some of those contests to get an idea of how all of that really works. You'll have to establish a contest structure. Again, how are you all going to do this? Is this going to be, how are you going to determine who your county qualifying teams are? Do you need to have a regional or a sub-regional or district kind of contest? How's the state contest going to work? And matching that up into the weird 4-H calendars that are already so full, they're bursting at the seams. That's going to take more than you. That's going to take a team of folks to make sure that that's going to work. The other one is to create those practice and contest scenarios, just like we've shared with you with the apple. Hey, we're going to have some of those for our teams to practice with. So I want to stop right here for just a moment and share with you the backwards thinking process that I worked through. So we're going to back up through a few slides right here. So bear with me for just a moment. Regarding group think, and Matthew emphasized this many times, Friends, this is all based off of the study guide. So it's a very simple scenario. You are not necessarily having to provide product or recommendations on that. Literally, it's a regurgitation of that information. We're looking at the characteristics that make the best apple. That's what the study guide was about. So groupthink scenarios are fairly simple to write. With the writing the case, the judging class scenarios, let me make a recommendation here. Do these backwards. Here's what I do. I create my chart first. I've got my topic picked out, and I'll give you an example. Last year at the national contest, we had one on sleeping headbands that play music in the ear. I had given my sister one for Christmas this year, and it was just a last minute kind of pickup sort of item, and she absolutely loved it. So I went and bought myself one. Well, I absolutely loved it. Well, then I start researching. It's like, well, I don't know that I got the best one. Let's see what else they've got out there. So I had my topic picked. I knew I wanted research. I wanted sleep headbands. So I create a chart, and I literally went on to Amazon and found 4 different sleep headbands and created these criteria. Well, we needed to compare price. We needed to compare water resistant, sweat resistant material. We needed to identify where the earbuds were. We needed to identify how long the charge lasts. All of those things were listed in this top tier of criteria. And then I went in and ranked these, literally created the rank to make sure that it came out where I'm going to have a clear winner on this, and I'm going to have a clear loser on this, and somewhere in the middle, it's going to be a little bit iffy and confusing. And then I went and wrote my scenario at the end. So kind of keep that in mind when you're putting that together. I think it's very difficult. This was a mistake that I made at the very, very beginning when I was learning how to do this. I would write the scenario and then have to go and find these products. And sometimes the products did not exist. So I do it backwards. And so I would make that recommendation to you all that you develop your chart and pull your products first, get all of that worked out, and then write the scenario to fit that. I'm also going to provide a little help for you on this just because it's so challenging to kind of get this started. Tennessee has a Google Drive that has a number of these scenarios already written in there we use for practice. I'm trying to get that cleaned up. It has some other things in there as well, but I told Dr. Hendricks that after this presentation, if I could get a list of your emails, I would be happy to add you to that Google Drive so that you will have some automatic judging classes to work with. And those judging classes also include the charts and the cuts, places, and reasonings sheet at the very, very end. So we'll be happy to share that with you after we finish this presentation. Anyway, you're going to need a committee to continue to work these up and write these, because as Matthew indicated, we change these out every 2 years in order to keep up with what is going on in the real world regarding consumerism. And then you'll need a committee also to help write your rules for your state contest. In Tennessee, if a 4-H'er does not compete on the regional level, they cannot substitute in on the state level. If something happens to one of the state teams that are coming and they have an illness, we allow them to substitute in as long as that 4-H'er had competed on the regional level. On the state level, we only allow one team, or we allow 2 teams from every county that qualify on the regional level. We can have 2 teams from each county. So anyway, so that may be different for you. So writing rules for the contest, establishing what that contest structure is. Those are a big task. You're going to need a team to help you with that. Professional development is another huge component. You're going to need to provide some in-service training, kind of like what we're doing today. How does this contest even work? doing some of those on-site visits. If you can visit another state that's close by, their regional contest, district contest, county contest, if you can visit a state that has a county team who is preparing to compete on one of those levels and go visit their practice sessions, that would be a plus to help you learn this material even better. And then if you in your state can create, like our Google Drive, this online platform where counties can create scenarios and then share them so that we have this entire plethora of judging classes that we can go into and practice. I encourage sharing groupthink scenarios as well. It just saves our county agents and educators some time in prepping to get their 4-Hers ready for this contest. And then the final thing as the lead for your consumer decision-making contest is that you're going to have to figure out what kind of contest are we having? Do we have enough interest to have regional and sub-regional contests? That does not always happen, especially in the beginning. So years ago, Tennessee, when we would have the consumer decision-making contest, our first place winner would go to Denver in consumer decision-making, and the second place state winning team would go in the FCS Quiz Bowl. Again, the Quiz Bowl is based off of that study guide, so they've already learned that material. One of our regions in the center of the state, they had a contest. They had the FCS Skill-a-thon that they would do on the regional level, but we did not offer that on the state level because the other regions were not involved. So at that time, we just allowed that regional winning team to go to nationals as the state winner in the FCS Skill-a-thon contest. So it's taken a while to build this momentum, and I suspect that it will take you some time to do that as well. So think about that contest structure, maybe piloting some of these programs, maybe how can you work this in? We have some of our contests at the state fair. We have some of them interacting with other judging contests. What does your state calendar look like? Is there a way to work this in that makes it easier on all of those involved? So that kind of wraps up our presentation on the consumer decision-making contest. I know that we're recording this session. You're welcome to take a snapshot of that picture or a screenshot. It has both my contact information and Matthew's contact information. And again, we sit as the co-superintendents for this particular contest for the FCS Championship and Conference. And then at the bottom is the website to the National FCS Championship and Conference, where all of this information that we have been referring to, the study guide, the what's to expect, the scorecard, the scoring rubrics, all of that are housed there, including information about the national contest and the where are you going to stay and all of that. I know registration is not open yet, and we have just finalized the hotel set up for next year. So keep looking for that site because registration will open up later on in the fall. And so with that, Dr. Hendricks, we turn it back over to you. If we've got any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Thank you. So there was a question in the chat that Megan answered that was about the age, and she answered it about the age range for students to participate, 4-Hers to participate in Arkansas. What are the guidelines at the national event for 4-Hers to participate age-wise?
We follow the standards from the National Council, and I believe those are still not passing your 19th birthday by January 1, and then that you haven't had collegiate work in that content area.
Okay, and so it's senior 4-H members, so no younger than 14, is that correct? So like that 14 to 19 age range of the traditional senior 4-Her. And here in Arkansas, that's it is a state-only 4-H activity, so your 4-Hers can participate in that at State 4-H-orama, which is the senior 4-Hers, those 14 to 19-year-olds. Thanks, Matthew. And then there was the question that in the Q&A about the cost, Matthew answered that it's $300 per participant. And so for those of you, if you maybe didn't see that, just want to make sure that you knew.
And that
Any
was
other
last
questions?
year's price.
Oh,
We're
that's
still
last
working to
year's price.
finalize what this year's will be.
Okay.
Hoping that there's not increased cost for the space and food, but you never know that. But Texas has been really good about trying to get some sponsorships for us as well. So we're very mindful of the cost and want to keep it down as low as possible. But the hotel cost last year was less than $200 a night at the conference hotel where you're at, but you were welcome to stay at any other hotels downtown. Yeah, San Antonio itself is walkable downtown, but you'll either want to do rideshare or get a rental car, to get from the airport to downtown. So those kind of logistical things if you're going to that. But the registration fee is for the entire conference and for the contest. So if you have a youth who's coming in consumer decision, but they also qualified in fashion review or FCS presentations, they're not having to pay that $300 twice, right? So it's just to cover that registration fee for the conference, and it includes their meals during the event, the breakfast, and then the awards banquet, and then other materials that they get as part of the educational sessions. So if they're not competing on a day, they don't get a meal, right? So we have 2 competition days. So consumer decision is on Friday. On the Thursday, that's generally a free day, and the teams go out and go to the Riverwalk anyway, right? But all the information about the cost we posted on the website, as Lori mentioned, whenever those details get finalized.
And I would like to add right here too, if you remember when we were talking about, how do you get this set up and getting everybody on board? And I mentioned the 4-H foundations. That's an important component. Tennessee, we're very fortunate that our 4-H foundation gives $1,000 to the winning teams to offset the cost of registration and help with travel expenses. The county still will have to do some fundraising, but if you've got a foundation that can help you with that is amazing. That helps with that, because it's our flights, that's an expense, and registration and hotel and food. And so if you got 4 4-Hers and a coach traveling, you can imagine how expensive that can get.
I wanted to say too, I know that some of the counties in Arkansas who have been to traditionally Western Roundup or other national events, they sometimes do some fundraising in their counties to offset the cost to the individual families and 4-Hers. So there are some of those other options for supporting participation. Here in Arkansas, we also have some practice classes, and I have a presentation that I put together that county agents are welcome to use for training 4-H judging teams. So let us know if you're interested, and I'm sure Dr. Gallimore and I would be happy to help you pull together some resources to get you started in training a team in this event. I had a question about if you have someone who's 18 when they participate in state, but turned 19 before January 1. So I am not the one who polices the age qualifying for 4-H events at the state or national level, but I do know that those will be enforced. And so I would say just double check with your state 4-H office, because we're in Arkansas, if we're sending someone to represent us, they're going to have to comply with the Arkansas guidelines for 4-H participation. So that would be under the jurisdiction, first of all, from the people who run our state 4-H program, and then with the people who run whatever national 4-H event that they're participating in. So when you have a specific age and birth date, if you're sure that that's kind of falling in an area where you're not sure exactly what the rule is, I would specifically say the age and the date that the age changes to see if you can, to make sure that you have a correct ruling on that. All right, well, we are out of time for today. So thanks for joining us. We have these webinars on a monthly basis on the fourth Wednesday of the month. So we'll be seeing you. I'll let you know when our next topic's coming up, and we'll be seeing you at future financial security webinars. Thanks for joining today.